Hospital black janitor, lady hides a deadly secret, until gunmen storm the emergency room. Hello, and a very warm welcome to a brand new week. Before we dive into the hustle and bustle, I just want to take a moment to express a simple, heartfelt appreciation for you. Your presence, your energy, and the shared passion for great stories are what make this journey worthwhile. Every Monday is a gift, a fresh start, a clean slate. It's a powerful reminder that we have a new opportunity to chase our goals, create something beautiful, and spread a little kindness. Whatever this week holds for you, whether it's challenges to conquer or milestones to celebrate, I hope you meet it with courage, grace, and the belief that you are capable of amazing things. Wishing you a week filled with clarity, productivity, and moments of unexpected joy. Let's make it a fantastic one together. Now, with that positive energy set for the week, let's return to the life or death tension in the corridors of Northwood General. For 5 years, she was the ghost who cleaned their floors invisible. But when the emergency room doors burst open and the gunfire started, Dr. Liam Caldwell realized their janitor wasn't just a woman with a mop. She was their only chance at survival. The fluorescent lights of Northwood General's emergency room hummed a constant, indifferent tune, a sound Alara Vance had long ago learned to tune out. It was the soundtrack of her invisibility, the low buzz that accompanied her as she moved through the organized chaos like a wraith in a grey uniform. Her cart, a squeaky vessel of antiseptic sprays and neatly folded rags, was her partner in this quiet dance. For 5 years, this had been her world. The scuffs on the linoleum, the faint, coppery smell of blood that bleach could never entirely erase, the discarded gauze pads that told tiny, tragic stories. She was 42, but the weariness in her shoulders and the deliberate slowness of her movements made her seem older. It was a practiced slowness, a conscious effort to be unremarkable. She kept her eyes down, her expression placid, her posture slightly stooped. Anonymity was a cloak she wore more dutifully than her uniform. It was her penance and her sanctuary. Tonight, the ER was a symphony of controlled panic. A multi-car pileup on the interstate had flooded the bays with the injured and the frightened. Alara worked the periphery, her mop gliding across the floor in smooth, overlapping arcs. It was a hypnotic motion, one that allowed her mind to go quiet. But it never truly did. While her body performed the mundane task of erasing the physical evidence of pain, her eyes, a deep and startlingly clear shade of brown, missed nothing. She saw Nurse Patel's hands tremble slightly as she administered N4, a sign of a double shift catching up to her. She saw the way a young intern fumbled with a chart, his confidence a thin veneer over raw fear. She saw the set of a mother's jaw as she held her child's hand, a statue of terrified hope. Alara was a student of the unseen, a cataloguer of the quiet details that screamed louder than any siren. Her gaze drifted to the center of the storm, Dr. Liam Caldwell. He was, in a word, brilliant. It was an objective fact, like the boiling point of water. He moved with an unnerving, predatory grace, his tall frame cutting through the chaos, as if it parted for him. His voice, crisp and authoritative, sliced through the noise, delivering diagnoses and orders with a finality that left no room for doubt. Tonight, he was orchestrating the response to the pileup, a conductor commanding his orchestra to play a life-saving sonata. Bilateral femur fractures, get him to imaging now. Page ortho, tell them I want them waiting. And get me a chest tube tray in trauma 2, we've got a tension pneumo, people, let's move. He was magnificent in his element. But Alara saw the other things too. She saw the way his jaw tightened when the intern asked a question he deemed stupid. She saw the dismissive flick of his wrist as he took a chart from a nurse without making eye contact. He saw patients not as people, but as complex puzzles to be solved, ailments to be conquered. His brilliance was a fortress, and inside it, Alara suspected, was a man who was profoundly, achingly alone. She knew this because she recognized the architecture of his fortress. It was built from the same material as her own. As she pushed her cart toward a bin, her path intersected his for a fleeting moment. He was striding toward trauma 2, his eyes already on the next problem, the next life to be snatched from the brink. He didn't so much see her as register an obstacle. "Excuse me," he said, the words clipped impatient. He didn't even look at her face, his gaze fixed on the name tag pinned to her grey shirt. Alara. Facilities. She did what she always did. She melted away, pulling her cart back with a practiced deference, making herself smaller. "Sorry, doctor," she murmured to his back. He was already gone, swallowed by the curtain of the trauma bay. He wouldn't remember the exchange. He wouldn't remember her at all. To him, she was part of the humming lights and the sterile smell, a function, not a person. And that was exactly how she needed it to be. The safety of being no one was the only peace she had ever known. She continued her rounds, the squeak of her cart's wheel a familiar, comforting complaint. She refilled the paper towel dispenser in the staff bathroom, her reflection in the mirror a stranger she met with a resigned nod. The woman looking back had tired eyes, and a story she had buried so deep she sometimes prayed the dirt would hold forever. The faint, silvery scar that traced the line of her right temple was hidden by a few stray curls of her tightly bound hair. It was a reminder. Everything was a reminder. Have you ever felt invisible in a crowded room, like you're a ghost moving through your own life? Sometimes, the roles we play become the cages that keep us from who we truly are. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt that way. An hour later, the initial surge from the accident began to subside. The cacophony softened to a low, exhausted murmur. Patients were either stabilized and admitted, or the worst had happened, and a different, more somber kind of quiet had fallen over their designated corners of the ER. Liam stood at the central nurse's station, rolling the tension from his neck. He'd just finished a grueling 2-hour procedure to stabilize a crushed pelvis, a masterclass in surgical improvisation. He felt the familiar, hollow victory that followed such efforts. He had won. He had beaten back death for one more person. But the wind felt thin, brittle. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the bone-deep fatigue and a familiar, unwelcome silence in his own head. He looked out over the floor. He saw Nurse Patel, now slumped in a chair, staring into space. He saw the young intern, now quietly restocking a cabinet, his earlier fear replaced by a kind of numb competence. He had commanded them all, but he hadn't connected with any of them. His eyes scanned the room, and, for a second, landed on the janitor. Elara. She was wiping down the glass doors of the main entrance, her movements methodical, precise. There was an economy to her motion that was almost military. The thought was absurd, a product of his exhaustion. He dismissed it instantly. She was just the cleaning lady, part of the scenery. He ran a hand through his dark hair, the hospital's sterile air feeling heavy in his lungs. He was supposed to feel satisfaction. He'd saved 3 lives tonight. He'd performed flawlessly. So why did he feel so empty? He thought of his apartment, a minimalist space of glass and steel overlooking the city. It would be just as quiet, just as sterile as this ER was becoming. His life was a series of flawless performances in empty rooms. He pushed off the counter, deciding to grab a coffee from the nearly empty break room. As he walked, he passed Elara again. This time, she was on her knees, meticulously scrubbing a stubborn, dark stain near the baseboard of the waiting area. A child's bloody handprint from earlier. Her focus was absolute. It was the same level of concentration he applied when locating a bleeder in a mess of damaged tissue. The observation struck him as odd, another strange firing of his overtired synapses. He paused, a question forming on his lips. He wasn't sure what he would ask. Do you like your job? Do you ever get tired of cleaning up after other people's pain? But the questions felt absurd, a breach of the unspoken contract between the seen and the unseen. Before a single word could escape him, the automatic doors slid open with a gentle whoosh. It wasn't a patient. It wasn't a family member. 3 men filled the doorway. They were dressed in dark hoodies and jeans, but it was their posture that seized the air in the room, sucking it out like a vacuum. They moved with a tense, coiled energy, their faces obscured by shadows and grim purpose. And in their hands they held guns. The world seemed to slow down, the humming of the lights suddenly deafening. For a heartbeat, there was only confusion. A collective, silent question mark hung in the air. Then the leader, a tall man with dead, cold eyes, raised his pistol and pointed it at the ceiling. The gunshot was an explosion of sound, so violent it felt like a physical blow. Plaster dust rained down. A woman in the waiting room screamed, a sound that shattered the paralysis and unleashed pure, primal chaos. People dove for cover, scrambling under chairs, behind desks. Nurses cried out. The young intern froze, his face a mask of disbelief. Liam's training took over. Threat assessment. Triage. Protect the vulnerable. His mind raced, calculating angles, exits, the number of hostiles. He was a man of control, and this was the ultimate loss of it. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and rage. He saw one of the gunmen move toward the triage desk, where Nurse Patel was cowering. He was about to shout, to do something, anything, when he saw a blur of motion from the corner of his eye. It was grey. It was low to the ground. It was the janitor. Elara. She was no longer on her knees, scrubbing the floor. She was rising, not like a tired, middle-aged woman, but like a predator uncoiling. The transformation was so instantaneous, so absolute, it defied reality. The stoop in her shoulders was gone, replaced by a spine of steel. The placid, downward gaze was gone, her eyes now laser-focused, impossibly sharp, calculating vectors and threats with an intensity that stole Liam's breath. One of the gunmen, younger and jumpier than the others, had broken off and was heading toward the pediatric wing of the ER, where a mother was shielding her small son. The boy let out a terrified cry. That cry was a trigger. Elara moved. She didn't run. She flowed. In her hand was the industrial-grade mop she'd been using. She held it not like a cleaning tool, but like a bow staff. In 2 silent, fluid steps, she closed the distance to the gunman. He turned, startled by her sudden proximity. His eyes widened in surprise. He never had a chance to react. With a powerful, twisting motion, she swept the base of the mop handle against the back of his knee. The joint buckled with an audible pop. As he cried out and stumbled forward, she reversed her grip. The wet, heavy end of the mop swung up in a brutal arc, slamming into the side of his head with a sickening thud. He crumpled, unconscious before he hit the linoleum floor she had just so carefully cleaned. In the same seamless motion, she dropped, her hand closing around the pistol that had fallen from his limp grasp. She ejected the magazine, caught it, and cleared the chamber in a single, practiced movement that took less than a second. The magazine and the loose bullet clattered harmlessly to the floor. She rose, the empty mop handle still in her other hand, and stood over the downed gunman. She was breathing evenly, her body poised, ready. She wasn't a janitor anymore. She was a weapon. A stunned, deathly silence fell over the ER. The 2 remaining gunmen stared, their shock momentarily overriding their aggression. The staff and patients, peeking from their hiding places, looked on in utter disbelief. And Dr. Liam Caldwell, the man who saw everything, stared at the woman he had never once truly seen. His mind, a repository of medical knowledge and logical deduction, refused to process what his eyes had just witnessed. The quiet cleaning lady, the ghost in the grey uniform. She had just taken down an armed man with a mop. The world had tilted on its axis. Nothing made sense. The lead gunman finally found his voice, a low, dangerous growl. He leveled his weapon, not at Liam, not at the nurses, but directly at the woman standing with lethal calm in the center of the room. Well, well, he snarled, a chilling smile touching his lips. What do we have here? The leader's voice, a low snarl that cut through the ringing in Liam's ears, pulled the room into a new, terrifying focus. Well, well, he said, the words dripping with a predator's curiosity. What do we have here? His gun wasn't aimed at the ceiling anymore. It was level, steady, and pointed directly at Elara. The second gunman, a weaselly, nervous man Liam would later know as Jinx, kept his own weapon trained on the huddled group of nurses and patients, his eyes darting around like a cornered rat. But the leader, the man with the dead eyes and the chilling smile, only had eyes for the janitor. He saw what Liam had just seen. Not a cleaning lady, but a threat. A question. An anomaly in his violent arithmetic. Elara didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her body spoke a language older and more honest than words. The mop handle, held loosely but with lethal potential in her left hand, was perfectly balanced. Her weight was centered, her feet planted shoulder-width apart. Her eyes, those shockingly clear brown eyes, were fixed on the leader, tracking the minute shifts in his posture, the subtle tightening of his finger on the trigger. There was no fear in them. There was only a chilling, absolute stillness. A void. From behind the curved nurse's station, Liam watched, his own terror momentarily eclipsed by a profound, intellectual vertigo. His mind, trained to diagnose, to find patterns, was failing. A human body couldn't move like that without thousands of hours of training. The biomechanics of the takedown were flawless, leveraging an opponent's momentum, striking a vulnerable joint, followed by a disabling blow to the head. It was brutal, efficient, and spoke of a muscle memory forged in crucible far removed from mopping floors. His brain cycled through possibilities: ex-military, disgraced law enforcement, clandestine services, but none of them fit the woman who had silently cleaned his workplace for 5 years. The woman he'd never even bothered to learn the last name of. "I'm going to ask you one more time," the leader said, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. The sound of his boot on the linoleum was like a gavel striking. "Who are you?" Elara's gaze didn't waver. A muscle in her jaw feathered, the only sign of the immense pressure she was under. The leader's smile widened. He was enjoying this. This was a welcome complication. You know what? It doesn't matter. We're not here for you. We're here for a package. A patient brought in from the eye. 80 pile-up. He's critical, intubated. Goes by the name Silas. The name dropped into the suffocating silence of the ER like a stone into a deep, dark well. Liam felt the ripples instantly, though he didn't know why. It was just a name. He had seen dozens of patients tonight. He couldn't place it. But Alara could. It was a flicker. A micro-expression, so fleeting that anyone else would have missed it. But Liam, a diagnostician of the human body, saw it. For 1/10 of a second, the void in her eyes was filled. An agony so sharp and so deep it was like looking at a raw, open wound. It was gone as quickly as it came, the mask of lethal calm slamming back into place. But he had seen it. The crack in the armor. This wasn't random. She wasn't a hero bystander. She was connected. The entire terrifying tableau. The guns, the invasion, the threat of death. It was all here because of her. The secret she'd been hiding, the story behind her anonymous existence, was no longer buried. It had just stormed the emergency room. Getting warm, am I? The leader, who Jinx now referred to as Rook, taunted. The name Silas means something to you. Jinx grew agitated. Rook, let's just find the guy and go. What is this? This, Rook said, never taking his eyes off Alara, is a professional courtesy. When one predator meets another in the wild, you show a little respect. He gestured with his gun toward the trauma bays. Now, since you're clearly part of the welcoming committee, why don't you tell me which room our friend Silas is in? Save us all a lot of trouble. And bloodshed. The threat hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Alara stood frozen, a statue caught between two worlds. The quiet, invisible janitor, and the lethally competent woman who had just revealed herself. To answer the question was to confirm her connection, to pull the pin on a grenade she had spent years trying to disarm. To refuse was to sign a death warrant for everyone in the room. The central event was no longer just the gunman's arrival. It was this moment, this impossible choice, resting on the shoulders of a woman who wanted nothing more than to be no one. The bomb in her life had finally, irrevocably landed. Every instinct in Alara's body screamed at her to retreat, to vanish. For 5 years, she had perfected the art of becoming background noise, of being less than a person, a mere function of the building. It was her only defense. Now, standing in the glare of Rook's attention, that defense was gone, and she felt stripped bare, exposed to a wind she thought she had long ago outrun. She tried. With a visible effort, she let the tension bleed from her shoulders. She lowered the mop handle, letting it rest on the floor with a soft thud, an offering of peace. A surrender. I'm nobody, she said, her voice raspy, unfamiliar even to her own ears. It was the first time she'd spoken since the invasion. I'm a janitor. I don't know any patients. I just clean the floors. Please, just let these people go. They have nothing to do with this. It was a desperate, pathetic plea, and she knew it. A flimsy shield against a tactical missile. Rook laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Nice try. Really. The whole fading into the woodwork act is good. You had me fooled for about 30 seconds. But the show's over. He gestured to the unconscious man on the floor. Janitors don't do that. Nobodies don't move like that. You and I, we speak the same language. So stop insulting my intelligence. Liam, still crouched behind the counter, felt his own form of resistance. His mind was a fortress of logic and reason, and it was under siege. He resisted the impossible evidence before him. There must be a rational explanation. He tried to file her away, to put a label on her that made sense. Maybe she took a few self-defense classes. A weekend seminar. Adrenaline can make people do incredible things. But it was a weak, flimsy argument. The economy of her movement, the chilling calm, the tactical assessment in her eyes. That wasn't from a seminar. That was ingrained. That was identity. He resisted the truth because the truth upended his entire understanding of the world. A world where doctors were heroes and janitors were invisible. That this woman, this ghost, could possess a competence and a danger that dwarfed his own was a reality his ego could not easily accept. The tension in the room stretched to a breaking point. A young nurse, barely out of her teens, let out a terrified sob. The sound broke Rook's focus on Alara. Jinx, already on edge, reacted instantly. He strode over and shoved the nurse hard. Shut up, he hissed, his voice cracking. The shove was a catalyst. It broke Alara's resistance. The sight of that casual brutality against a helpless person reignited the fire she had been so desperately trying to smother. The janitor vanished again, and the warrior resurfaced. "Leave her alone," Alara said. The words were quiet, but they carried an immense, undeniable weight. It was not a request. It was an order. Rook's smile returned. "There she is. I knew you were still in there." He turned his attention back to the larger group. "All right, new plan. Jinx, get them all up. On their feet. Phones, watches, pages, all in a pile on the floor. Now." A frantic collection of personal effects began. The sound of clattering plastic and metal was the only noise in the room. "You see," Rook said, addressing Alara as if they were the only two people there. "You've created a problem for me. I came here for a quiet extraction. But you've made things loud. Now I have witnesses. Leverage." He pointed the gun at Nurse Patel, whose face was pale with terror. "And you're going to be my guide. We're going to find Silas together. Or I'm going to start thinning the herd. And I will start with her." The choice was gone. Her resistance had failed. By trying to hide, she had endangered them all. The past she had run from had not only found her, it was now using the innocent lives around her as a shield. The weight of that responsibility settled on her, a familiar, crushing burden. Her shoulders straightened. The resignation in her eyes was replaced by a grim, cold resolve. She had to engage. She had to play the game. "All right," she said, her voice steady now. "I'll take you to him. When faced with an impossible situation, do we retreat into who we've been, or are we forced to become who we truly are? Think about a time you were tested. Did your old self or a new, stronger self emerge? Share your thoughts in the comments below." Liam watched the exchange, a cold dread mixing with his disbelief. She knew the patient. She had just confirmed it. This entire nightmare was centered on her. And now, Rook was making her the key. Rook wasn't stupid. He knew he couldn't let the other medical staff go, but he also knew Silas was in critical condition. He scanned the huddled group of doctors and nurses, his eyes landing on Liam. He recognized the authority in Liam's posture, even as he was trying to make himself small. "You," Rook commanded, gesturing with his pistol. "The tall one. You a doctor?" Liam's heart hammered. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I am." "Good," Rook said. "You're coming with us. You're going to make sure our package stays gift-wrapped. The rest of you," he said to the others, "are going into the staff lounge. Jinx will be watching the door. If anyone makes a sound, the doctor and the janitor get a bullet. We clear?" A series of terrified nods was his answer. As Jinx began herding the staff away, Rook locked his gaze on Alara. "After you." Alara turned, her face an unreadable mask, and began walking toward the trauma bays. Liam, his mind reeling, was forced to fall in step behind her, Rook's presence a cold weight at his back. He, the brilliant surgeon, the master of his domain, was now a pawn. And he was being led into the heart of the crisis by the one person he had never, ever seen. The resistance was over. Reality, in all its brutal, terrifying glory, had arrived. The air in Trauma Bay 3 was cold and smelled of antiseptic and fear. The rhythmic, labored hiss of the ventilator and the steady beep of the heart monitor were the only sounds. On the gurney lay a man in his late 40s, unconscious, a web of tubes and wires tethering him to the world of the living. Silas. His face was a mess of cuts and bruises, but even through the damage, there was a rugged handsomeness to his features. Rook shoved Liam toward the bed. "He started crashing an hour ago. Make sure he doesn't do it again. Your life depends on his." Then he turned to Alara, who stood rigidly by the door. "And you're my insurance. You stand right there where I can see you. You so much as twitch, the doctor gets it." Jinx stood guard just outside the open door, his weapon trained on the hallway, a nervous sentinel. Rook positioned himself near the entrance, giving him a clear view of both his hostages and the main ER corridor. The trauma bay, usually a place of life-saving action, had become a cage. Liam's professionalism, a shield he had honed for years, took over. He pushed aside his fear and focused on the patient. He checked the monitor readings, the ventilator settings, the 4 drips. The man was stable, but precariously so. A significant head trauma, internal bleeding that had been surgically stopped for now, and multiple fractures. A house of cards. He and Alara were trapped in this small, sterile room, bound together by the unconscious man on the bed and the gunman at the door. It was an impossible, intimate proximity. For the first time, Liam was forced to truly be in a space with her, not as a doctor and a janitor, but as two people caught in the same deadly trap. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. Liam couldn't stand it. His mind, needing to solve the puzzle, to impose order on the chaos, took over. "What was that out there?" he asked, his voice low, his hands busy checking the patient's pupils with a penlight. He didn't look at her. "It doesn't matter," Ilara replied, her voice flat, her eyes fixed on Rook. "It looked like it mattered," Liam pressed, his frustration simmering. "You took down an armed man with a mop. That doesn't just happen. Who are you?" "I'm the woman who's trying to keep you from getting a bullet in your head," she shot back, her voice cutting like glass. "So I suggest you focus on your job, Doctor." Her words stung, but he knew she was right. He returned his attention to Silas, his frustration turning into a grudging respect. She was right. The immediate problem was keeping this man alive. He began a more thorough assessment, rolling up the man's sleeve to check his perfusion. As he did, a distinctive scar on the patient's forearm was revealed, an old, jagged white line, shaped almost like a lightning bolt. It was unusual, memorable. Suddenly, an alarm blared from the cardiac monitor, a shrill, piercing cry that signaled disaster. "Vitach!" Liam's brain screamed. The patient's heart was beating erratically, a prelude to full cardiac arrest. "He's crashing!" Liam yelled, all pretense gone. Rook took a step into the room, his gun raised. "Stay back," Liam ordered, his voice raw with authority. "If he dies, you get nothing." Rook hesitated, his eyes flicking between the frantic doctor and the monitor. "I need the crash cart," Liam said, his eyes darting around. It was just outside the bay. "Ilara, the red cart, bring it here now." She didn't hesitate. She moved with that same impossible fluidity, outside the door and back in with the heavy cart in seconds. "I need to shock him, but I have to manage his airway first. It's collapsing." Liam was working frantically, grabbing an amber bag. "I can't bag him and charge the paddles at the same time. I need your hands." He looked at her, truly looked at her. "I need you to hold his head. Tilt it back just like this." He demonstrated quickly. "Keep the airway open. Don't let his chin drop. Do you understand?" Ilara moved to the head of the gurney. Her expression was intense, focused. She placed her hands on either side of Silas's head, her touch firm, steady. As her fingers brushed against his temple, her breath hitched, a barely audible gasp of pain. For a second, her composure wavered. Liam saw her eyes close, a moment of profound, silent grief. Then they snapped open, clear and resolved. She tilted his head back perfectly. The moment forged a strange, temporary bond between them. The arrogant doctor and the invisible janitor were gone. In their place were two people working in seamless, desperate synchrony to save a life. He smeared gel on the paddles, charged them. "Clear," he shouted. Ilara instinctively pulled her hands back. The body on the gurney convulsed as the electricity shot through it. Liam's eyes were glued to the monitor. The erratic rhythm stuttered, then fell back into a steadier, more regular beat. He let out a shaky breath, the adrenaline coursing through him. They had done it. For now. He looked at Ilara. She was still standing at the head of the bed, her hands hovering just above Silas's head, as if reluctant to break contact. The harsh fluorescent light from above caught the side of her face, illuminating the faint, silvery scar that traced the line of her own temple. A lightning bolt, not identical to the one on Silas's arm, but there was an unnerving similarity in its age, its texture. A piece of the puzzle clicked into place, a piece he didn't understand, but knew was significant. These two people, the unconscious man and the janitor warrior, were bound by more than just this crisis. They were bound by old wounds. The silence that fell between them now was different. It was heavier, filled with the weight of shared history and the dawning, terrifying realization that their survival was completely, inexplicably, tied to each other. He was no longer just a doctor, and she was no longer just a janitor. They were allies, and the enemy was at the door. The ventilator hissed. The monitor beeped. Time in the trauma bay had warped, stretching into an elastic, terrifying present. Liam, working with a renewed, desperate focus, had managed to stabilize Silas again. He was hanging on by a thread, and Liam was the only thing keeping that thread from snapping. Rook watched them from the doorway, a silent, menacing statue. Liam worked, but his mind churned. He kept glancing at Alara. The woman who stood with soldier-like stillness at the head of the gurney bore no resemblance to the ghost who had haunted the hospital corridors. He kept seeing the flash of her scar in the overhead light, a mirror to the jagged mark on Silas's arm. They were connected, linked by violence. "Those scars," Liam finally said, his voice a low murmur that wouldn't carry to Rook. "They're from the same incident, aren't they?" Alara's gaze remained fixed on the hallway, but her posture stiffened. For a long moment, she said nothing. The only sound was the machinery breathing for the man between them. When she finally spoke, her voice was a ghost from another life. "We were in a safe house. Bogota. It was supposed to be a simple extraction." The words, safe house, Bogota, extraction, were so alien in the sterile environment of Northwood General that Liam's mind struggled to place them. He looked from her stoic face to the unconscious man on the bed. "We thought we were clear," she continued, her eyes unfocused, looking back through time. The beeping of the heart monitor seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of distant thunder in her memory. Flashback, 7 years ago. A small, rain-lashed apartment in a dreary part of Bogota. The air is thick with humidity and the smell of ozone. A younger Alara, her name was Leo then, is leaning against a windowsill, watching the storm. Her hair is cut short, practical. Her movements are sharp, alert. She wears jeans and a dark t-shirt, and a handgun rests on the table beside a half-eaten plate of arepas. Silas, his face unmarred, his eyes bright and alive, comes up behind her. He doesn't startle her. She knows he's there before he even moves. He wraps his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He's smiling. "Thunder is just the sky clearing its throat," he whispers, a familiar code between them. She leans into his embrace, a rare moment of peace in a life defined by its absence. "It's been too quiet. I don't like it. We're out tomorrow morning. Wheels up at 0600. Then it's 2 weeks on a beach with no names and bad cell service," he promises, his lips brushing her temple. "The scar isn't there yet. Just you and me." The promise hangs in the air, a fragile, beautiful thing. For a moment, they are not Leo and Silas, elite operatives for a private intelligence firm that cleaned up messes governments wouldn't touch. They are just a man and a woman, dreaming of a quiet life they both know they can never have. Then the world explodes. The door splinters inward, blasted off its hinges. The thunder she heard wasn't from the sky. Men in tactical gear flood the small apartment, the sharp, deafening reports of automatic gunfire filling the space. Silas shoves her down, covering her body with his own as bullets chew through the wall where they were just standing. He's shouting, returning fire. She comes up shooting, moving with a deadly grace, 2 shots to the chest, 1 to the head, a practiced, horrifying rhythm. They are back to back, a 2-person army against impossible odds. But there are too many. A bullet grazes her temple, a searing, white-hot pain that drops her to one knee. The world blurs. Through the ringing in her ears, she sees Silas take a round to the leg, then another to the abdomen. He goes down, his eyes finding hers, a look of desperate, furious love on his face. The last thing she sees before she's dragged away is a man standing over Silas, bringing the butt of a rifle down on his arm with a sickening crack. "They left him for dead." Ilara's voice came back to the present, hollowed out by the memory. "They took me. They wanted to know who we worked for, who hired us for the extraction." She paused, her breath shuddering. "I spent 6 months in a black site prison before I got out. By the time I did, Silas was gone. The agency was gone, scrubbed from existence. Our entire lives were erased. They called it the Ghost Protocol, a contingency for when an operation goes so sideways that all assets involved are disavowed, their records wiped clean." She finally turned her head and looked at Liam. The void was gone from her eyes, replaced by a grief so profound it was like looking into the abyss. "I thought he was dead. For 7 years, I thought he was dead. I became a ghost myself, because it was the only way to survive. The only way to keep anyone else from getting hurt. I came here, to this quiet town, took a job no one would ever look twice at. I buried Leo, and became Alara Vance, the janitor." She looked down at the man on the gurney, her hand reaching out to hover over his, not daring to touch. "I was erasing a name from a patient list tonight when I saw it. Silas. They said he was a John Doe from a car crash, but he had a wallet. The name was there. After all this time, I found him." Her voice broke on the last words. The puzzle pieces in Liam's mind didn't just click into place. They fused together with the heat of a terrible, tragic fire. The skills, the silence, the scars, the secrecy. It was all penance. It was all a hiding place. He wasn't looking at a puzzle anymore. He was looking at a woman who had lost everything twice. He's not just a patient, is he? Liam asked, his voice soft with a dawning, heartbreaking understanding. Elara shook her head, a single tear finally tracing a path down her cheek. It looked alien on her stoic face. He's my husband. The confession hung in the cold air of the trauma bay, changing everything. He's my husband. The words recontextualized the entire night. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was the final, bloody chapter of a story 7 years in the making. Rook wasn't a random thug. He was a ghost from a past Elara thought she had buried. Liam looked at Silas, then back at Elara. The arrogant surgeon, the man who saw people as problems to be solved, felt a profound and unfamiliar wave of humility wash over him. He had been so wrapped up in his own sterile, lonely world that he had moved alongside this woman for 5 years and seen nothing. He saw a uniform, a mop, a function. He had missed the person entirely, a person with a history more profound and painful than he could have ever imagined. I'm sorry, Liam said. The words felt small, inadequate. For not seeing you. Elara gave a short, sharp nod, accepting the apology for what it was. There was no time for more. He can't die, Liam. She used his first name. It was the first time. It landed with the weight of a formal pact between them. Whatever they want, they think he knows it. If he dies, they have no reason to keep us alive. I know, he said, his voice grim. I'm doing everything I can. An hour passed. Then another. The forced proximity bred a strange and fragile intimacy. They didn't speak much. They listened. To the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. To the steady beep of the monitor. To the nervous shuffling of Jinx in the hallway. They existed in a state of hyper-awareness. A two-person island in a sea of mortal danger. At one point, Liam's stomach rumbled, a ridiculous, mundane sound in the face of their situation. A faint, ghost of a smile touched Elara's lips. There's coffee in the break room, she said, her voice a low conspiratorial whisper. And a stash of protein bars behind the decoff pods. Emergency supply for the night shift. He looked at her, surprised. You know about that? I know where all the bodies are buried, she said, a flicker of dark humor in her eyes. It was a startling glimpse of the woman she must have been before. Leo. Rook, growing bored and impatient, barked from the door. He's still breathing? He is, Liam answered, his voice steady. Thanks to me. But I've been on my feet for 16 hours. I need caffeine, and I need to check his blood gases from the lab. I can't do that from in here. Rook considered it. Silas's life was his only leverage. He couldn't afford for the doctor to make a mistake from fatigue. Fine. You too, he gestured to Liam and Elara. You go. Jinx will escort you. 5 minutes. And Jinx, if they so much as look at someone wrong, you shoot the doctor first. Understand? Jinx nodded eagerly. The short trip to the break room was surreal. They walked down the empty, silent corridor, the squeak of Jinx's sneakers behind them. It was a parody of a normal hospital routine. In the break room, Liam grabbed a coffee and Elara retrieved a protein bar, breaking it in half and handing a piece to him. It was a simple gesture of communion, a sharing of rations in a foxhole. As she reached for her own coffee, the chain of a locket slipped out from under the collar of her grey uniform. It was a simple, silver oval, tarnished with age. She quickly tucked it back under, but not before Liam saw it. It was another crack in her armor, a sign of the soft, vulnerable heart she kept hidden beneath the layers of ghost and warrior. You never know when the world might end, she murmured, nodding at the protein bar. Always be prepared. It was a motto from her old life, but it fit her new one perfectly. Trust is often built not in grand gestures, but in small, shared moments of vulnerability. Have you ever formed a bond with someone unexpected during a crisis? Let me know in the comments what that experience taught you about connection. They walked back in silence, Jinx close behind. As they re-entered the trauma bay, the fragile peace they had found was palpable. They were no longer just a doctor and a janitor. They were Liam and Elara. Allies. Comrades. A bond had been forged in the crucible of fear and confession, a delicate thread of understanding in the suffocating darkness. For the first time, in a room with 2 gunmen and a dying husband, Elara didn't feel entirely alone. It was a dangerous feeling. It felt terrifyingly like hope. The hope was a flicker of light, and Rook was the darkness that came to extinguish it. He had been watching them. He saw the way Liam looked at her now. Not with impatience, but with a kind of awe. He saw the shared protein bar, the quiet understanding that passed between them. He was a predator, and he recognized that the dynamics of his trap had shifted. His hostages were no longer just a doctor and a janitor. They were a team, and a team was a threat. Touching, Rook sneered as they stepped back into the bay. You two have gotten awfully friendly. Neither of them responded, resuming their positions, the fragile bond between them a silent shield. Rook's eyes narrowed. He was a master of psychological warfare, and he knew exactly where to apply pressure. He walked over to Alara, his movements slow, deliberate. He was invading her space, testing her control. I'm starting to get tired of this, he said, his voice dangerously soft. I think it's time you gave me a reason to keep your husband here breathing. Something I can take to my employers. Alara's jaw was tight, her body rigid. I have nothing. Oh, I think you do, Rook said. His eyes scanned her, and then he saw it. The faint line of the chain around her neck. Before she could react, he reached out and hooked his finger under it, yanking it free. The silver locket flew from under her shirt, snapping off the chain and clattering to the linoleum floor. No! The cry was torn from Alara's soul, a sound of pure, primal agony. It was the sound of a sanctuary being violated. She lunged, but Rook was faster. He kicked the locket, sending it skittering across the floor, and leveled his gun at her chest. He'd scared. What's this? A secret? Liam watched, frozen, as Jinx scooped up the locket and handed it to Rook. Rook popped the delicate clasp open with his thumb. He stared at the contents for a moment, then a slow, venomous smile spread across his face. He turned the open locket toward Liam. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of a little girl with Alara's clear eyes and Silas's smile. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Liam's mind short-circuited. A child. There was a child. The stakes of the entire night shifted again, becoming impossibly, unbearably higher. Well now, Rook said, his voice a silken weapon. This complicates things. Or maybe it clarifies them. He looked from the photo to Alara's horrified face. You know, Doctor, I think we've all misunderstood the situation here. He took a step toward Liam, showing him the photo again. This is why she ran, he said, his voice filled with false sympathy. This is why she became a ghost. It wasn't to hide from people like me. It was to hide this little girl from him. He jerked his head towards Silas on the gurney. The lie was brilliant in its cruelty. It took every truth Liam had just learned and twisted it into a poisoned knife. What? Liam breathed, looking at Alara for a denial. He's lying, she choked out, but her voice was ragged with pain. The violation had shattered her composure. Rook pressed his advantage. Is he? Think about it, document. A man like that, he gestured to Silas. A man who lives a life of violence, who gets hunted by people like me. Is that the kind of man you want around your daughter? She left him. She took the girl and ran. She's been hiding from him for 7 years. We didn't come here to kill him. We were hired to find him. By her. The lie was perfect. It explained her skills, her disappearance, her terror. It painted Silas as the monster and Alara as a desperate mother. It was a narrative Liam's protective instincts wanted to believe. He looked at Alara, her face ashen, her eyes wide with a pain so deep he couldn't comprehend it. Her silence, born of shock and grief, looked like guilt. Alara? Liam asked, his voice pleading. Is that true? Her head whipped around to face him, her eyes blazing with a new, terrible fire. It was the fire of ultimate betrayal. After everything they had shared, the fragile trust they had built, he could even ask the question. He could believe the poison of this monster over her. How can you even ask me that? She whispered, and the words were shards of broken glass. A powerful, fast-acting sedative used for emergency intubations. He had made his choice. He would not choose pride. He would choose vulnerability. He would choose her. He turned around, one syringe palmed in his hand, the other held openly. The reckoning had come. Act 9, Resolution. All right, Liam said, his voice calm, projecting a control he didn't feel. I'm going to administer this through his central line. I need you to step back. Give me some room to work. He gestured for Rook to move away from the bed. Rook, focused on the potential loss of his asset, took a single, grudging step back. It was all the space Liam needed. He leaned over Silas, his body shielding his hands from view. He pretended to fumble with the foreport, his heart hammering against his ribs. Alara, he said, his voice quiet but urgent. The crash cart. When I say now, hit the big red button. Her eyes widened slightly. The button was a code blue alarm. It would flood the ER with security and staff. It would be chaos. It was their only chance. She gave the barest of nods, her body tensing, ready to spring. "What are you two whispering about?" Jinx asked nervously from the doorway. "The doctor is saving your payday," Rook snarled. "Shut up." Liam took a deep breath. He looked at Alara, one last time. "Trust me." "Now," he whispered. In one fluid, explosive motion, everything happened at once. Alara lunged for the crash cart, her hand slamming down on the red alarm button. The piercing, deafening wail of the code blue alarm shattered the silence, a cavalry charge of sound. Simultaneously, Liam spun, not toward the patient, but toward Rook. The syringe full of sedative was in his hand, the needle glinting. Rook, caught by surprise, raised his gun, but Liam was already inside his guard. He wasn't a fighter, but he was a surgeon. He knew anatomy. He plunged the needle deep into the thick muscle of Rook's thigh. Rook roared in pain and rage, swatting Liam away like a fly. Liam crashed into a steel supply tray, the sound of clattering instruments adding to the din. Rook tried to bring his gun to bear, but the sedative was already hitting his system, a wave of chemical fire turning his limbs to lead. Jinx, panicked by the alarm, fired his weapon blindly into the room. The shot went wide, shattering a canister on a shelf. But his moment of panic gave Alara her opening. She grabbed a heavy, metal oxygen tank from its holder on the wall. It was awkward, heavy, but in her hands, it was a weapon. She swung it in a low, brutal arc, connecting with Jinx's knees. He screamed and crumpled to the floor. Rook was still fighting, trying to clear his head, trying to lift his heavy gun arm. He managed to aim it at Liam, who was struggling to get up. "You," Rook slurred, his vision blurring. He never finished the sentence. Alara, having discarded the tank, was on him. She moved with the lethal grace of her old life, a phantom of vengeance. She grabbed his gun arm, twisting it with a sickening crack of bone. The weapon clattered to the floor. Using his own weight against him, she drove him backward. He stumbled, his legs refusing to obey him, and collapsed into a heap. Silence. The code blue alarm still blared, but in the trauma bay, the fight was over. Heavy footsteps and panicked shouts echoed down the hallway. Liam pushed himself up, his side aching where he'd hit the tray. He looked at Alara. She stood over the two downed men, breathing heavily, her body a coiled spring of adrenaline. The ghost, the warrior, and the mother were all there, one and the same. Security flooded the room, weapons drawn, finding a scene of utter chaos. A brilliant surgeon leaning against a wall, two armed men incapacitated on the floor, and a janitor standing guard over them all. An hour later, the ER was a controlled whirlwind of police, debriefings, and hushed, awe-filled whispers. Jinx and a barely conscious Rook had been taken into federal custody. The story was already becoming a legend. Liam found Alara in the now-quiet staff break room. She was sitting at a table, holding the tarnished silver locket in her hands, her shoulders finally slumped in exhaustion. She had put her ghost uniform back on, but it didn't fit anymore. It couldn't contain the person everyone now knew she was. Liam sat down opposite her. The silence between them was no longer toxic. It was hesitant, fragile. "They told me Silas is stable," he said softly. "The police are guarding his room. He's safe." "Thank you," she whispered, not looking up from the locket. "Alara." He started, the words catching in his throat. "I am so sorry. For doubting you. There's no excuse. I was afraid. And you were right. I had no idea what you'd been through. I failed you." She finally looked up, and her clear brown eyes held no anger, only a deep, bone-weary sadness. "You're a man of science, Liam. You look for the most logical explanation. And Rook's lie was logical. My truth wasn't." "It doesn't matter," he insisted. "Trust isn't about logic. I should have trusted you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the protein bar wrapper from what felt like a lifetime ago. He placed it on the table between them. An offering, a memory of the bond he had broken. "You were the bravest person I've ever met. And I was a coward." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "No, you were a doctor. And when it mattered, you were an ally. You made the right choice in the end. It was forgiveness. An absolution he didn't feel he deserved, but one he would spend a long time trying to be worthy of." The break room door opened, and the hospital administrator walked in. "Alara," she began, her face a mixture of awe and confusion. "The federal agents want to speak with you. They said they have a message for you. From your sister." Alara's head snapped up, her heart leaping into her throat. "She said to tell you that Maya just won her soccer game," the administrator said, reading from a notepad. and she wants to know if Mom will be home in time to see the trophy. The tears that came to Alara's eyes now were not tears of grief or pain. They were tears of pure, unadulterated relief. A wave of it so powerful, it almost knocked her over. She's okay. She's safe. The secret she had carried, the burden she had shouldered alone for so long, was finally, truly over. Liam watched her, his own eyes stinging. This was the victory. Not the takedown of the gunman, but this moment of peace. A final thought for you all. True connection isn't about never having doubts, but about having the courage to find your way back to trust. What does reunion and redemption mean to you? Share your definition of a happy ending in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. 3 days later, Liam stood by the window of a private hospital room. The sun was streaming in. In the bed, Silas was awake. He was weak, his voice a rasp, but his eyes were clear, and they were fixed on the woman sitting by his bed, holding his hand. Alara was telling him about Maya, about her soccer games, her love for science, her terrible taste in music. She was filling in the 7 years of silence with the sound of their daughter's life. Silas listened, tears streaming down his face, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. Liam had come to check on his patient, but he knew he was witnessing something sacred. A resurrection. Not just of a man, but of a family, of a love that had survived black sights and bullets and 7 years of crushing silence. Alara looked up and saw him by the door. She smiled at him, a real, genuine smile. It was a smile of gratitude, of shared history. It was the smile of an equal. He nodded back, his own heart feeling a sense of peace it hadn't known in years. His world was no longer empty and sterile. It had been filled with the chaotic, messy, beautiful truth of the woman he had once seen as invisible. As he turned to leave them to their reunion, he heard Alara's soft voice, a perfect emotional echo of a life they were finally reclaiming. "Thunder is just the sky clearing its throat," she whispered to her husband. Silas squeezed her hand. "It sounds like a beautiful day is coming." Liam walked away from the room, but he wasn't walking back to his old life. He was walking toward a new one where he understood that the greatest heroes were not always the ones in the spotlight, but sometimes they were the quiet ghosts who cleaned the floors, waiting for the moment they were needed most. And that love, true love, could be a secret deadly enough to tear the world apart, but also powerful enough to put it all back together again. And there we have it. A story of love, loss, and the incredible strength hidden within the quietest corners of our world. To every single one of you who stayed with us through every tense moment, every heartbreaking confession, and every pulse-pounding second of this journey, thank you. Truly, your time and attention are the greatest gifts you can give, and I am endlessly grateful that you chose to spend them here, with us. Stories like Alara's and Liam's remind us that there is always more to people than meets the eye, that trust is a bridge we must choose to build, and that love can be the most powerful force for survival. We all have a story, and I hope this one resonated with yours in some small way. If you were moved by this journey, and want to make sure you never miss another, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the channel, and join our community of story lovers. We have so many more emotional, addictive tales coming your way, and I can't wait to share them with you. And if you're new here and hungry for more, I invite you to explore the library of stories already on the channel. There are so many other worlds to discover and characters to meet. You might just find your next favorite. Thank you again for being the best part of this. Until the next story, take care, be kind, and always look for the hero hiding in plain sight.